write a program that reads this data and prints out a nice little report. Now here's what it's going to look like. Here's what we want. We want it to display a title of an exam or of a grade section or something like Homework 1. Then we want it to have somebody's name separated by some scores. 89, 100, 45, 200, whatever. And then Bob, scored 100 and 100 and 100, whatever. And then Sue scored. And we're actually going to save this file of 50, 90, and 100. Now that makes it look like she didn't do as well as the rest, so we're going to give her 95 and a 90 and 100. There we go. Okay. So, and then we want it to say Homework 2. And the same idea. Some students, maybe the same students, maybe different students. Joe, comma, 0, comma, 100, comma, 30, whatever, Bob, 1, 100. Sue, 90, 98, whatever. Now we need some kind of marker in our file to indicate the break between these two. So, one thing we could do is we could mark the name of the homework with some special indicator that it's a homework name rather than being a name followed by a whole bunch of scores.
So like Python? You mean like calling it Python?
Well, something that indicates that it's the start of a new section. I don't know, and we could just make it 2 dashes or a dash, or something like that. I'm not really happy with the dash, but it would make sense. And then let's make a homework 3. And it may be something to indicate that it's the complete end of the file. There's way more than one way to do this kind of stuff. I'm just kind of coming up with something that would make a text file that was easy for somebody to type in then to submit into this Python program. And that kind of makes sense to me. That last thing would mean into file. So we want a program that will open this. Bless you. I don't know what to call this.
Well, I have to do it, since I have a Mac, I'll have to do it like the other way you showed me on all my notes.
Open it, do it in Python. Do it in idle, and then when you do a save as, make sure that you choose to save it as a text file rather than a Python file. That makes sense? Okay. Or if you save it as a Python file, make sure the file you open is .py. Anyways, so let's just call this, I don't know, class scores.txt. Just remember what you call it. And if you save it to your desktop, great. If you save it to your scripts folder, your daily homework, whatever, just remember exactly where you save it, because that's where you're going to, where your program is going to open it from. So when it runs, and you don't have to type this part, what we want it to look like is to say something like this. Homework 1, Joe made an 89%, whatever. Bob made an 88%. Sue made a 97%. And then we wanted to say homework 2, and like I said, don't type this stuff. This is going to be kind of the format of the output. We wanted to say Joe made it, 50%, whatever. These scores have nothing to do with the values that I actually typed up there, right? 98%, Sue made 100, whatever, and then homework 3, and then it's done. That's what we want the output to look like. I'm going to cut all that. Just going to keep that tucked away in the back of my brain. So we're going to write a program that will open this file and read this data. And if we think about what it needs to do, kind of pseudocode it. I'm going to open Python. Kind of write some pseudocode, but I'm going to put the things in comments. Get back here. So I wanted to open the file. While not done, this is just pseudocode. Read the name of the homework of the assignment. Read a line of data which contains the student name and the scores. Get the student name from it. Get the scores from it as a list. Calculate the average. I guess when we read the name of the assignment, we ought to print it out. So read the name of the assignment and print it out. And then, lastly, print the student name and average. And we're going to keep doing this until we hit one of these. So we need another while loop because it needs to keep repeating this, blop, 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 until it hits one of those. So we're going to have a while loop inside of a while loop. So, while not done with student, read a line of data, get the score name from it, like that. So our two markers between the sets of the data, one was a single dash. That marked the end of a student, right? So we will just put a break statement here. If line is equal to, like that, then break. That will break us out of that loop. And here, we're going to do the double dash. If line is equal to a double dash, then break. Otherwise, print the name out. Alrighty. Then we need to close the file. That's our pseudocode. I recommend that we skip this part, calculating the average, and do the rest of it and then go back in and work on calculating the average. Because if we can read all the data in, then we're 90% of the way there. So that's going to be our pseudocode. We could just copy that, and actually write our Python code intermixed with it. I'm going to make a backup copy of this pseudocode somewhere. Or actually, yeah. So I'm going to do a file new. Make a backup copy of it just in case I need to reference it again. Then I'm just going to minimize it. Or I could save it as class scores.pcode, something like that. So class scores.pcode for pseudocode. Except it should be a text file. Doesn't matter though, we're not going to run it. Okay, so that's our pseudocode. Is it perfect pseudocode? No, it really ought to have a start up at the top and a stop at the bottom. Maybe format it a little bit better. I hope this makes sense, what we've done so far, the idea of how this logic matches this file that we have created. Let's bring the two back up side by side. So, Read the name of the assignment. That'll work. We get homework 1. If the line is equal to dash dash, then break. Well, it doesn't, so we're going to continue. While not done with that student, we're going to change that just to a while true. Read the line of data. It's going to read in Joe. If the line is equal to a single dash, break. It's not. So get the student name from it. That's the first piece of data. Get the scores from it as a list. That's the next piece of data. Calculate the average, whatever. Print the student name and the average. And then it needs to loop again. It's going to read the next line of data. Get the name out. Get the scores out. Calculated average. Read the next line. Is it a dash? No, it's not. Get the name. Get the scores. Read the next line. Is it a dash? It sure is. So we're done with that student. That's what the if break does. So we come back up here to this while loop, kind of the master while loop. And it does all of this again, over and over and over. That's known as an inner loop. The inner loop handles these. The outer loop handles each larger block. Hope that makes sense. That's what's known as nested loops. And you'll see it when we actually write it in Python. The inner loop's going to be tabbed over more than the outer loop. All right, so going back to our real code here. Like I said, I'm going to tuck the pseudocode over to the side. Open the file. Alrighty. Let's ask for the name of the file. That's always polite. Print. What is the name of the file to open? And then get that. File, whoops, I can't type today. Name is equal to input. Do we need to convert it to an int? No, because it's a file name. It's a string. Now let's try to open that file. File is equal to open file name. And we're opening it for reading. I'm going to save this. I'm going to call it class_scores.py. It's not a text file. Class_scores.py. I'm going to run that just to make sure it does something. Class_scores.txt. No such file or directory. Did I not call my file class_scores.txt? I did. What directory did I save it into? Oh, I put this one in the wrong place. Pardon me. I need to resave that. I just put it in the wrong directory because I wound up teaching 2 different classes in this same computer. Okay. All right. Just like voting, vote early, vote often, run early, run often. Class scores .txt. If that works, great. I mean, all it did is open a file, right? But we didn't get an error message, so encouraged, we will continue. So while not done, while true, read the name of the assignment. We need a line of data. Line is equal to file dot read line. Did I get that right? Let me guarantee that I got that right before I go on. Okay. Now, the last time we talked about opening files and doing stuff with them, we had to do something to the line of data that we read in before it was really ready to process. And do you remember what that was? It's okay if you don't, but let's go ahead and print that line out just to see what it looks like. And let's just run it. It's not a working program yet, but hopefully it'll print some stuff. Class scores.txt. Alright, it's gone nuts. It's who knows what it's doing now. It's never breaking. What's wrong with this? Well, For one thing, we need to make sure that we haven't just read in nothing. If we've read in nothing, we're at the end of the file. And that's a big mistake at this point. But so let's do this. If the length of the line is equal to 0, then break. That'll break out of our outer loop. Else print the line. Okay, there's still a problem with the data. What is the name of the file to open? Class scores. I'm going to regret making it a whole word like that rather than just t.txt or something. Okay, it's printing it out, but it's putting spaces in it. Do you remember how we got rid of those blank lines in our output last time?
/n, right?
That's what's in there, our /n's, and we want to get rid of the /n's. We want to strip them out. How did we do that? We used the rstrip command, or we can just use strip, which will cut off both ends of it, of spaces. So let's do that. Line is equal to line.strip. That removes any extra spaces and /n's at the beginning and the end of the data. Now let's run it, make sure the output looks better. We're doing it piece by piece just to make sure that every part of it works before we go on to the next one. And if you get stuck, if you get syntax errors, it'd be an awfully good time now to get me to help you fix it rather than to wait until 30 minutes from now. Class scores.txt. Okay, that looks a lot better. All it's doing is reading the file and writing it to the screen. It's not actually processing the data, so it's not a useful program yet. But we're getting the skeleton in place. Okay, so we've read a line of data. What was the next part of it? If the line is equal to a dash dash, then break. We can do that. If line is equal to dash dash, that's our end of file marker, then break. Honestly, we don't have an end of file marker if we do that right there, but I thought it made sense as we were writing the file out as a text file, so we'll just leave that. We sure do hope that no student has a name of dash dash, right, or something like that. Hopefully not. Else we're going to print the name of the homework. Well, we've already done that. So why don't we just cut that line and move it below that break, like that. All right, so our logic is read the line. If the line is no data, break. Then strip the line of any /n's and extra spaces. If it's a dash dash, break, else print it because it's the title of the homework assignment. It'll say homework 1 or homework 2 or something like that. Now we need to do the inner loop that reads each line of data for that homework. So while not done with student, I think I'm just going to delete those if line is equal to break, else print it out. We've done that now. I didn't use an else, but it's not necessary to use an else if you have a break, because if it doesn't break, that's the only thing left for it to do. We could put an else there if we thought it made it look better, but let's not. So while not done with the student, let's put another while true. While true. Okay. I kind of like that comment. I'm just going to leave it there. I changed it to an S, though, while not done with students. We need a new line of data. How do we read that in? The same way we read it before. Maybe I'll call it line 2 this time. I don't know. Line 2 is equal to file.readLine. And again, if we read in no data at all, it's a real problem, and we ought to just break. If len of line 2 is equal to 0, then break. Now let's strip it. Line 2 is equal to line.strip. And if it's a single dash, that marks, is that what we used? Yeah, single dash mark the end of the student list. So let's do that. If line 2 is equal to a single dash, then break. Now line 2 equals our data. We need to break the student name out. What we really need to do is convert it into a list. Y'all remember a way of turning a string into a list? It's actually one of the test questions. If you have a list, a string that has a whole bunch of pieces of data separated by commas, there was a command that would break that up and put it into a list. I hear murmurings. Anybody remember? Split. Split will take a string and turn it into a list. So let's just call it L. Or D for data? I don't know. Data is equal to line 2.split. And we have to specify that it's being split by commas. Why? Because there's commas between each piece of data. So the first element in the data is a name. Let's get that name out. Name is equal to, how do we get the first element? Data is a list. We want the first element out of it. What's its index number?
0.
Yeah, so data, parentheses 0. That gets our name out. Now we want everything in the list except for the first number. So how would we start a list at the second element and go all the way to the end? We'd have to use slicing. So let's do scores is equal to line 2, and we'd want to do some slicing. Now we want to start at the second element, so what's its index number?
Would it be 1 with a colon after it?
It would be a 1 with a colon after it, exactly. 1 starts at that position, and colon means go all the way to the end. All right, before we calculate the average and all that stuff, why don't we just print out the name and then print out the scores, just so that we can check to see if we're done. I mean, not done, but to make sure this algorithm is working. I'm going to put some comments in. End of student list and end of homework scores. Those are kind of the markers, you know, because we have a while here. We're going to put the end of the while here. Is this necessary? No, but it kind of helps us keep it in our mind because we're writing a kind of a long program, actually. And why don't we just print done? So we know something happened, even if nothing happens, you know. Alrighty, let's run it and see if it prints out names and scores. What is the name of the file to open? Why, it's class scores.txt. Well, that doesn't look too great.
Mine did the same thing.
Mine did too.
Yeah, so did mine.
Was that done?
Yeah.
Yeah, we got our done. That rocks.
It's an homework.
Well, what do you know?
Where we strip line 2, should it be line 2.strip?
Uh-huh. Right there. See that? I thought I was clever by storing the data in a different variable, but then I stripped the first one that we read in, which is the name of the homework assignment.
Okay, well,
That kind of did it.
There we
yeah,
go.
but it still looks funny.
Kind of the closer battle.
Joe.
Joe,
Yeah, blah, blah, so.
Joe-O. Bob-Bob. Hey, Bob-Bob, how'd you do? Okay.
Wonderful, apparently.
Yeah. We need to get a 1 on the
He's under-
Is it because the name equals data 0?
You know, I got my hand.
Should be 1?
This should not be line 2.
Are we splitting or something?
I made lots of mistakes.
That should be data.
It should be data.
Human error.
Yeah. We want the first element of the data here, and we want all the rest of the elements here. Just a second, I'll be right there.
There we go.
All right.
That's probably.
Okay. At this point, you have a list of scores.
Why did my
I'm going to wander around and help y'all. For those who have it working, work on this. Calculate the average of the scores, and then print name, comma, average, rather than printing name, comma, scores.
Oh, darn.
So do that those two parts. See if you can get that working. You know, I'll show y'all how in a minute, but I want to go and walk about first.
Ooh.
So in order to get this to work actually properly with our file, we just had to make this change. It looked like it was working, but it was also printing out, I didn't notice this, a dash at the bottom with an empty list of scores. And now it is not doing that. What we need to do is to turn scores into a list of ints rather than a list of strings. There's more than one way to do this, but let's write a function that takes a list of strings and returns a list of ints. Kind of like what we've done before. Scroll up above everything. Let's do a DEF get int from strings. So we need to make an empty list. L2 is equal to blah. Then we need to do a for each loop to rip through the list of strings, converting them to ints. So for every string in the list, let's convert that to an int. S is equal to int s, and let's append that to our list. L2.append s. And after our for loop, unindent 1 so that we can return L. May as well add a comment because that's looking a little bit cryptic. Convert a list of strings to a list of ints. I guess if we made them floats, then they could enter partial scores, 95.6, 95.8. So let's change that int to float. Bless you very much. Alrighty. Then we have to invoke this. I wish I could do both of those on the same line. I don't know what I just did. So scores is equal to, what did I call my function? I don't even remember anymore.
You say you called it. Yeah, but shouldn't you change to get from strings?
Yeah, it should be. I'm going to change the name of it to just get floats. Or get float list. That's shorter. Okay, get float list is the name of our function. We are going to call our function, if my mouse would come back. Where's the mousey? There we go. Down here, after we do scores is equal to data 1, we're going to do scores is equal to get float list, parentheses scores. Like that.
What is scores equal? Scores is equal to get float list scores, right?
Just a sec. Let me make sure it didn't break it. Yeah, it did. Okay. Get float list is the name of our function. So down here it should be scores is equal to get float list.
You have floats list.
Floats list. Yeah. Okay. I had to fix that. Make it get float list and then pass scores in. All right, this actually looks like a list of numbers now, and not strings. All righty. Now onward and upward. How do you calculate the average? It's the sum of the list divided by the length of the list. It would have been nifty, rather than using these special dumb symbols, if we just said, okay, a blank line.
Oh, yeah.
And a blank line. Like that. Doesn't that look better?
Yep. If you want to.
Let's do that. Take all your double dashes and single dashes and whatnot out. We need to change our if statements as well. Instead of, rather than if equals double dash, just make that blank. Same thing here. Instead of a single dash, make that a blank. We don't even need this or down here anymore. You could delete that.
Yeah, we're good.
All right. I'm going to take those debug messages out. They clutter the output. So I don't want this print statement here anymore. I don't want this print statement anymore. I don't want to check it to a double dash anymore, and we're already checking it to a blank, so I'm going to delete that entire or part. All right. All right, I'm happier with this format now. Okay. To calculate the average is not too hard. To get the average when it's in a list, you just do this. Average is equal to the sum of the scores divided by the length of the scores. And we may have worked at calculating averages with much longer ways, with for loops and all that stuff, but that's really all it takes. As long as you have a sum function available to you and a length function available to you, you may as well use that. And then print name, comma, average is equal to, comma, average. Well, what do you know?
Yeah, see, mine blew up after I made that change.
Mine didn't blow up, it brought back the weird things.
Well, mine did.
Mine doesn't say what's wrong with yours now.
Maybe I shouldn't have changed all those dashes.
Control Z, Control Z, Control Z.
Yeah, undo, undo, undo.
Hold it down.
Go back.
Mine's not divisible by 0.
Yeah, that's what mine's giving me division by 0.
Because you can't do it. Gotcha.
That's fine.
I'm changing my print statement to name, comma, scores, comma, average equals, just out of curiosity. I don't think it's going to even get that far, though. Nope.
No, it didn't.
Okay, fine. Print name, comma, scores.
I'll just let you run it.
They look like they're still strings. I thought we converted them to a list of
Put
ints.
that up there.
Are you working on the right one? You had 2 files up.
You did have 2 files. I forgot to work on
This is the right one
You
because
saved
you
one
can
as
get
C.UI.
Yeah, I've got 2 of them up. Nuke that one. Who knows how many things? Yeah. Get rid of that. Get rid of that. Make sure this is returning L2. Looks like it. I'm going to add a debug print here to find out what we're returning. Print debug, comma L2.
Oh yeah, I should probably figure out how to do that. Okay, it goes there, but you can't find it.
Can we get the drop
Yeah, sure. I'm glad it's working for y'all.
Did you actually say get floats list?
I am so sorry, pardon me.
Did you call the?
Did you call the get floats list? Or did you forget to because you were helping?
That's possible. That would be the most...
Yeah, it
Yeah,
looks like
it's
that's.
not
Ah, for Pete's sake, that's what I did. Okay. Now I am ready
I still
to
can't divide by 0 then.
cook.
Yeah, mine's yelling at me because I'm trying to find the average.
Division by 0.
What's it called?
It's just math.
It's just bad. I can't even do it.
This is all programming those.
What's that?
It's just not a deal.
Today is not
It
data.
doesn't-
Yeah, yours is saying that yours are.
Ah! Must be nice.
Okay, I'll remove my debug statements and then wander around and help y'all.
There you go, I fixed it. You misspelled scores.
Thanks.
That's so fun.
Yeah, I still can't divide by 0.
I do that all the time.
Alright, so this is our final version of get floats list. Here's our final version of the code that calculates the average, starting from here to here, with the important stuff, the part that's been giving us fits, being from here to here. Alright, people watching at home, I had kind of forgotten where we left off, so I'm just going to let you scroll through the code as I do, and you can eyeball. So one mistake I've seen is that get floats list. I may have called it something else when I was invoking it down south. So there's your get floats list function. Pause it, enter all the text. I'm going to remove the comments as I go, and then you can still pause it. Okay, so here's where we're going to what is the name of the file to open, all the way down to here. We could fix this a little bit. We don't need those two statements if length of line is equal to 0. So that's our while loop. I don't think we need that print line there. I'm going to get rid of that. Oh, we did need that. That's where we print out the homework. Print out the name of the homework. And then here is the while loop for reading in the students. It looks kind of long. We could probably use functions to shorten it. But that's it. We don't need this print statement anymore because we're printing the names and the scores here, so we don't need that one. So I'm going to delete that one. Alright, go ahead and pause it, double check it, and hopefully it works. Oh, and I had a print done down here at the bottom. Alrighty, see you next time.